Folks, we made it to college basketball. We had an eventful week of games. I hope you all enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed my week of games slightly better than you did, Brad, simply on the results of our favorite teams. Brad, your Friars took a loss after allowing lost to Wichita State after allowing Siena to compete with them. Siena then beats George Washington in a bye game. Uh, Siena Siena looked good. Northwestern looked good in the final 10 minutes against New Orleans after struggling a bit early. It was a lot of fun to watch my own teams. I got to go to a game on Thursday night, which was a lot of fun. Northwestern taking on New Orleans. I'll be on press row at Welsh Ryan tomorrow for Northwestern against American, and then press row at Loyola on Wednesday for Niagara. When they come to town, Loyola looking to avenge a loss they already suffered this season against Furman on Friday. But Brad, how are you feeling about your Friars after a tough loss to Wichita State that I don't think you saw coming?
No, not good. The panic meter is high. The defense was bad. Our point guard play, not good. Emmett Holt mysteriously can play 25 minutes in the exhibition and then can't even get on the court in the regular season. And then miraculously, he gets put in with 5 minutes to go in a close game, having not played pretty much the first two. Just no idea what's going on. Very concerned. Season's over. Pack it in. Nothing more to say.
Yeah, I mean, that's the natural overreaction. We'll try to bring some of those overreactions to the show today. I thought it was a really fun just week of basketball. Generally for my teams, I thought Northwestern, once they found their good lineup, that lineup being Anthony Gaines, Ryan Taylor, AJ Turner, Vic Law, and Derek Pardon, they were really good on defense and they were really good on offense. So I think that was really exciting. But they did have their struggles. It was definitely frustrating at times. I think they'll come along. And I was just really impressed by Siena's Jalen Pickett, the freshman running the show. Had 7 points, 9 assists, 2 turnovers against Providence, and then 19 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists against George Washington. I mean, they're still undermanned, but to have that type of play from your point guard is just so huge. And I think he'll be a big reason if this team can move up the max standings, why they're able to do that. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, we started obviously Champions League Classic. Duke's upset win is really, or not upset win, but Duke's dominance over Kentucky was really the biggest story of the week in college basketball. I think we would be remiss not to talk about it. So Brad, just some takeaways from that game for you. I mean, Duke ran away. I don't think anyone expected this game to be as big a blowout as it was. I mean, how much did it tell you about Duke? How much did it tell you about Kentucky? And how concerned are you about the college basketball season if Duke looked that good against the Kentucky Wildcats?
No, I'm not overly concerned. I mean, they have 3 amazing players who played exceptionally well against Kentucky, and Kentucky looked amazing over the summer in that foreign trip to the Bahamas. But there's still, were some concerning signs. Like Reed Travis wasn't great on that trip, and he hasn't been great thus far. The point guard play, where you have a couple of freshmen and Quickly and Higgins. And Higgins is, kind of falling into the same archetype of these guys who are great. They are these amazing high school prospects built on kind of their quickness, but they can't shoot, and they've really struggled out of the gate. And we saw last year with Trayvon Duvall. We see it with these guys all the time that the congestion of the college game makes it difficult. So Kentucky's point guard situation, maybe Higgins isn't as sure of a thing as many thought. And then Tyler Harrow, who had a big overseas trip this summer. I believe he was over in their most recent game. He hasn't found his shooting stroke like he did earlier. So when you kind of factor those 3 things together, the Reed Travis impact hasn't realized yet. Harrow kind of took a step back from his stellar summer play, and then the point guard problems. I don't think it's surprising that Kentucky struggled. Even had a close game with Southern Illinois, who's a pretty good team, probably top 100. But I think that also just shows that Kentucky's going to be a work in progress. I'm not super worried. I think that they'll still be at the top of the SEC, whether they win or be a 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Not quite sure yet, but I don't see them falling much further than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest concern if you're a Kentucky fan has to just be the point guard play. I mean, I was on the Emmanuel Quickly should be the point guard of this team bandwagon. He has not looked that good. Hagens has struggled, as you mentioned. And I don't really see Quade Green as a point guard. I see him more as kind of a combo guard you play next to a bigger point guard. Um, so it's definitely a concern. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I didn't watch a ton of the Southern Illinois game. I didn't actually, honestly, watch a ton of Duke and Kentucky. I probably could have watched more, but I kind of switched to more compelling games once it was clear that Duke was going to run through, run through this one. I'm not going to go too down on Kentucky. I think they're going to learn and they're going to get better as the season goes on because they're young. I mean, there's been so much talk. Oh, they bring back guys, but like Hagens, Harrow, Johnson, you know, Quickly, all freshmen. EJ Montgomery, a freshman. I mean, Nick Richards, a sophomore who barely played last year. When you act like sophomores or elder statesmen, there's going to be challenges still in terms of youth. I think they're going to figure it out. With Duke, I mean, if you let this team get out and go, no one's going to stop them. I mean, if you let Duke get rebounds and just push with Barrett, Cam Reddish, Zion, Trey Jones, and whoever closes out that rotation, it's over. Like I cannot envision a circumstance where a team beats Duke letting Duke run. Now, I think the bigger takeaway for me than any performance by Zion or RJ, I mean, Jack White really established himself as a super useful player in these first two games. I mean, in the Kentucky game, he had 9 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, and then today against Army, another solid performance from Jack White. 6 points, 2 assists, 4 rebounds. I think he's probably the best fit as that fifth man over Marcus Bolden, over Alex O'Connell. I think Jack White, even over Javin DeLaurier, I think he's a really nice fit. He can stretch the floor a little bit. He's going to grind. He's going to rebound. I think it works. It's just you're going to have to slow this team down and make them beat you in the half court. I mean, Zion's looked better than I anticipated. RJ Barrett has looked the part. Cam Reddish has looked really good. But you have to make them beat you in the half court, and that's pretty much what Army did most of the way. They were still really effective on offense, but you could kind of back cut them to death. Army hung in. Tommy Funk was really good in this game, the junior. I think if you play in the half court and run really good stuff, you're gonna have a chance to beat Duke on their youth. But when they run, it's ball game.
Yeah, I think that White is certainly one of their top players and will play a lot. I think I still like Javin DeLaurier as that fifth guy. Just someone who doesn't need the ball, someone who's going to rebound and defend at that center spot. But I think he really hit the nail on the head. With that big three being even better than anticipated, especially Zion, where so much is made about his vertical athleticism, but his ability to change speeds and change directions and just be so shifty with the ball. That's where he's really going to make a huge impact. That and on the offensive and a defensive glass, where he's just a dominant force. But if he can kind of rein in his jump shot a little bit, make it more consistent, I think he is certainly in the discussion, if not the front runner, for that number one pick, just with his versatility and his physical profile there. I do think it's interesting how little Alex O'Connell has played. I'd figured he would be the sixth man, top 75 recruit going into his sophomore year. Played pretty well in his kind of limited role last year. I thought he would be the major beneficiary there, take a step up in terms of role. But it seems like Jack White is going to be that guy.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Some other big results around the college basketball landscape during opening week. Florida State just boat raced Florida, and that's a result we were both surprised by. We both picked Florida to win that game. Washington handled Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky looked good early, then kind of faded. Nevada had no problems with BYU. Kansas ran out to an early big lead against Michigan State and held on as the Spartans really caught their stride. Several teams, high-profile teams, struggled in bye games. You mentioned the Kentucky game. LSU fought hard with UNC Greensboro before pulling that one out. Buffalo was the big upset in a bye game, though, knocking off West Virginia. That's not really an upset too much in my mind. I mean, James Bolden knocked out of the game really changed that one. Uh, and Buffalo's like a really good team. But I mean, I think that's as significant a result as we'll see in opening week in terms of the at-large picture. CJ Massenberg at 43 and 14 in this game. Bolden for West Virginia went out with an injury. We'll see how he is long term. It had 21, 4 and 4 in 23 minutes. A super impressive performance from him. When you kind of look at the slate over the opening week, what's your biggest takeaway? Maybe a team, a game that you really took a lot away from.
I'd say probably that Florida State that you mentioned earlier, because I have Florida, or in the preseason I had Florida State 11th and I had Florida 19th, but I had picked Florida to win because Phil Kofer is injured. But I mean, Florida State looked really, really good, and they did it without Phil Kofer and really took it to Florida. I mean, I was really shocked by that outcome. In terms of why I liked Florida so much, I thought Andrew Nemhard was being really underrated nationally as a really solid point guard option based on his play in all the FIBA stuff. I thought at 6'5", he was a really great fit next to Kayvon Allen, who I thought was going to have a bounce back senior year. Him and Jalen Hudson, that's a really good perimeter trio. And then Keith Stone, guy who can play the 4 and the 5, stretches the floor, very versatile. And they had a pretty deep bench with a lot of younger players, a lot of athletes. Some promising guys in there, but they just really looked disjointed offensively. I was genuinely surprised at how Florida State looked. Even though I was super high on them, I'm feeling a big year for the trio of Forrest, Walker, and Kabengele. Walker, especially in that game, looked really confident shooting the ball. He was a 5-star freshman coming into last year, but he didn't really look too confident. He came off the bench. Was more of a spot-up shooter in a kind of like a 15-minute to game role. But now that he has this bigger role, he looks a lot more confident, looking like a 5-star player. And then Trent Forrest had a big NCAA tournament, and I expect him to carry that over to this season.
Yeah, some stats on this one. Florida had 16 turnovers in this game, 4 by Nembhard, 4 by Kavarius Hayes, 4 by Keith Stone. Kayvon Allen, who was a guy who entered last year as a favorite for the SEC Player of the Year, has really seen his game really slide. In this game, doesn't score a point, 0 for 4 from the field. Just like, what do you make of Kayvon Allen just really having these struggles continue into this season? I think there had been kind of hopes that this was a one-year deal. It appears that is not the case.
Yeah, I think he had a solid game in their most recent bye game. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it's just it's you see it a lot with these guys who are this isn't the exact scenario that Kayvon Allen's in, but you see it a lot with guys who don't shoot the ball well one year, and then when they're trying to kind of sell themselves on their favorite team or kind of project this team for the following year, or this player, they always say, well, this player should improve his shooting. Right? I saw a lot with Iowa State and Michael Jacobson, where before Lard and Young were hurt, they said he's going to play the 4. He shot like 18% or maybe even less from 3 in his career. But I hear them say over and over, he's improved his shooting, like he's knocking down threes, he's doing all this stuff. And while it's unlikely that someone who shoots 18% from 3 becomes a capable stretch 4, it's certainly possible. I think people kind of took that same kind of logic with Kayvon Allen, where someone who has such a major drop from one year to the next, maybe it's a sign that there's something wrong mentally or there's an injury or something. But you kind of just want to go, oh, I bet he's going to bounce back and be what we expected. It's kind of wishful thinking, and I think maybe me having Florida 19th, maybe I was a victim of that logic too.
I had them ranked as well. I thought just Nembhard was going to be really good. He was solid in this game, probably their best player in it, but still not that great. 12 points, 4 assists, 4 turnovers. Hudson shot 3 for 10 from the field for 11 points. He was pretty quiet. Florida State was really good on defense. I think that was probably my biggest takeaway, was if they can be this good on D and this locked in, that's pretty impressive. As for, yeah, I think Florida State, they're deep, they're athletic. When you can bring David Nichols off the bench just to be a scorer, he was quiet in this game, but you can just have 16 minutes or 17 minutes of David Nichols as a scoring point guard. That's very useful. Behind a Trent Forrest, Savoy shot the ball extremely well in this game, had 20. This team is very dangerous. I had them in my top 10 after we posted our Rockin' 25 polls. I believe on Thursday afternoon, Brad. I had Florida State, I think, ninth. So I was ready to jump in on the overreaction. Florida State struggled a little bit today with Tulane. They won 80-69. So maybe not the best performance from this group. Kevin Gelly had 12 and 4 in 21 minutes. That's the bigger stat takeaway, along with Terrence Mann had 21 and 11 in this game.
Hey, at some point, it's just survive in advance. Like we saw with St. Louis, they were on the ropes against Troy, but they get that win. And maybe survive it in advance isn't as applicable now that the net is going to have more of a influence, presumably, on selection. But it's always better to win these bye games than to lose them, like we saw a lot with the A-10 and even like the Big 12 too, dropping a lot of bye games.
Yeah, I also the net. This is a fascinating thing. Tulane hangs in this game. It doesn't, and this game will count as the same margin of victory because Florida State won by 11 in hanging around against Tulane as they would against Florida, who they dominated. I'd be interested to know how that impacts the net. I think it's a really interesting point.
Well, so I haven't done too much research into the net, but I did see the graphic that was going around Twitter a few days ago that kind of broke down and described its components. And there is net rating in there, which inherently factors in margin of victory that's not capped. Right? Because your net rating is your offensive rating minus your defensive rating. And so the more that you win by, the higher your net rating is going to be, right? There's no other way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was actually thinking about was how much the net rating is offensive overall offensive efficiency minus overall defensive efficiency. So it's not just margin of error, or margin of victory, excuse me, but that certainly does have an impact. I think it's a good point.
Right, because the higher offensive efficiency you have and the lower defensive efficiency you the more you won by. Because the offensive efficiency is how well you scored per possession, and the defensive efficiency is how well you defended per possession. So the higher net rating is the higher difference between the few points that you allowed and then the many points you scored.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, really, to monitor how the net does impact things, and how I believe CBS Sports still has an RPI posted in their app. I don't know what other places have RPIs posted. I would be interested to have people running the numbers on the RPI constantly, and then run the numbers on the net and see the difference.
Yeah, and then obviously comparing that to Ken Palm and Eric Haslam, Haslametrics and everything.
Absolutely, it'll be really interesting to watch. Another team that I really wanted to touch on, more of a top 25 team, Auburn looked really good against a Washington team that I thought looked really good against Western Kentucky. In fairness, this is a road game, a cross-country trip for Washington after a game that Washington's already played, whereas Auburn had a home game against a pretty mediocre South Alabama club. But I think it has to be super, super good news for Auburn that they can win a game when Austin Wiley plays 13 minutes, when Donjel Purifoy doesn't play, against a top 25 team, and win it so convincingly. They were up by well over 20 points for most of the second half. Samir Doty was excellent with 18 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds in just 25 minutes. Chuma Okeke, 19 and 10 in 28 minutes. Malik Dunbar was useful. Or Spencer was an energy player off the bench. This team has guards. They have bigs. They're athletic. I think this is a Final Four contender. This is an early overreaction hot take, but that team looked like a Final Four contender to me.
So I see that you've jumped on the Auburn bandwagon that I've been leading since last April.
Yes, I believe I have, based on this Washington game. I think we'll learn a little more at Xavier on Monday, the 19th, so a week from tomorrow. The non-conference
Well,
schedule as a whole leaves a
well,
bit to
that's
be desired.
isn't that Maui Invitational?
You are correct. I just saw the at sign. I was like, road game, but it is Maui
I
on
did that
Monday.
earlier with in my preview of week one. I said Texas was playing at Arkansas, but they played on the Army base.
Yes,
So
indeed.
I'm not immune.
So any thoughts on this Auburn team that you've kind of led the bandwagon on?
So I wasn't able to watch this game because I don't have SEC Network, but I mean, this is kind of the points that I've been, kind of riding this optimism on is, they have everything. I mean, they got a great point guard in Jared Harper. They have shooting. They have wing scorers. They have great size. They have ability to play big or small, deep front court. I mean, really, the only knock that you could even claim that they have is just their overall talent level. You could see that they don't have like an RJ Barrett or even like a Luke May. Like one of these either NBA first round or like NBA lottery kind of guys, or this college superstar. But they have a ton of really good players. They're legitimately like 8 or 9 deep, and they're going to be a really tough out in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other kind of general top 25 top team takes before we move into some bubble teams? The A10 we wanted to touch on especially. Any top 25 team takes based on the opening week?
So I have a couple. First being the Western Kentucky and Washington game. I watched most of that, I'd say, until it kind of got out of hand late. But I was impressed that Western Kentucky could stay in that game without Bearden and Deshaun Murray, and then Josh Anderson was in foul trouble as well. I thought kind of the kind of turning point in the portion that I was watching was, Washington's obviously playing the zone, and Western Kentucky had Merrick Nelson in the middle, and I thought that was where it really turned, where he would get the ball in the middle. He looked a little hesitant. He got a shot blocked by a Ty Buell. I think Hamia Wright got one too, and he just couldn't really make enough plays out of there. That's something where if your four-man can't make the proper reads or be that much of a threat in the middle of the zone, you got to put your point guard in there or put a perimeter player, who's more comfortable with making a read. That's something that I think a lot of teams kind of underutilize and kind of just stick with that four-man in the middle of the zone. But Washington was super impressive in that game with their length. Mentioned Ty Buell, but I think the lineup with Dickerson at the 5 and Hamia Wright at the 4. I think that's probably where Washington wants to go long term. Gives them a lot of length and versatility there in the front court.
Yeah, I think Western Kentucky really missed Deshaun Murray in this game. I think he would have been a good guy to feed in the high post. I mean, when we did our Western Kentucky deep dive, Brad, we weren't sure Merrick Nelson would be in the rotation. So for him to have to start and be so impactful, same with Jake Omer, who's now a walk-on for this team, that's definitely a challenge. Josh Anderson in foul trouble was a challenge. I was really impressed by Charles Bassey in this game, 11 and 12. But every time Western Kentucky tried to feed the post, Charles Bassey had just created so much space. He's so strong as a freshman. I mean, this is a guy who looks like he's 30. I mean, he does not look. I mean, I don't want to do the like check the birth certificate thing, but that guy, I am floored that he is a freshman. If you tuned in, you'd be like, he's a fifth-year senior, 23-year-old. Like, he is so strong, and he is just going to wreck the Conference USA. Western Kentucky started to pull away in the early stages, late stages of the first half. Had a 9-point lead in the halftime. Was playing really well. Washington's offense really stagnated, but in the second half they looked really much better. Good adjustments by Coach Hopkins. I thought David Crisp was excellent in the second half. He's kind of the key to their season in my book. A scoring point guard by trade. Has had his ups and downs in his college career. He was excellent in this game. 13 points, 7 assists. Made some really big plays. He's very fast. Get out in transition and run. Finish at the rim. I think if he can take the next step, this Washington team is going to be special. I didn't take too much negative away from that Auburn game for Washington. I thought Washington just looked. I thought Washington looked really good against Western Kentucky and fine against Auburn.
Yeah, so then I think just kind of finishing up with my top 25 takes. The Buffalo West Virginia game, that was super entertaining. I don't remember exactly when James Bolden went out, but I think Buffalo had already started to kind of make their late push and kind of turn things around. Massenberg was obviously excellent in that game, but so was Jeremy Harris. I think he was like 1 for 9 from 3, but it felt like he was making a lot of plays. He definitely hit one big outside shot, and he was great at kind of probing the defense and getting to the basket. And then Javon Graves too. He was also excellent. Pushing the tempo. I think he may have started at point guard, which would have been surprising given Devonta Jordan was probably the odds-on favorite for that spot. But he also played well. And then Nevada BYU. That was a game I watched most of it. I went to bed as it was a close game, and then Nevada pulled away. But I was impressed with the BYU. Again, they didn't shoot the ball well, but they did a good job of getting into the lane and finding open players. I think TJ Hawes played pretty well, and then wasn't Celius, but one of their other guards was also good in that game.
I'm trying to remember the name of that BYU guard because me and Tony were talking about how good he looked. But on Buffalo, I mean, this team legit shot the ball bad in their first 2 games, one against the NEC favorite and one against a top 30 Big 12 team. And they still won both those games. I mean, they shot 11 of 37 from 3. They only shot 40% overall from the field. Nick Perkins kind of struggled against West Virginia. Harris was 1 for 9 from 3, as you said. I mean, it was all CJ Massenberg with those 43 points and 14 rebounds. But Harris, it's interesting because Harris was really the point guard down the stretch of this game for Buffalo. He was breaking the press on his own. He had 5 assists in this game, just 2 turnovers. That's a really interesting look for them. Devonta Jordan is one of my favorite players in college basketball with just how competitive he is on defense. He passes the ball, can shoot the ball a little bit. And then Graves can be a third scoring option as a guard. I had 14 in that game against West Virginia. And I'm still a little concerned about them size-wise long-term. I like the look that they were using a couple times with Janathan Williams at the 4, although Janathan Williams has struggled in both games. It's been a little underwhelming for me as a top 100 recruit in their 2 games. Ronaldo Segu as well, the other top point guard that they have coming in. Segu, to me, is just so skinny. He needs time. So, I mean, it's perfect because this year they have plenty of depth, plenty of talent, and then Williams and Segu can kind of develop. They have the transfers coming in like Antwain Johnson from Middle Tennessee State next year. He'll help a lot. But yeah, I mean, I was super impressed by Buffalo, just the way they competed, and Massenberg bailed them out, put them in legitimate at-large territory. I thought West Virginia actually looked good. I mean, I was not unimpressed by West Virginia for quote unquote like losing a bye game. I thought they were fine in terms of their depth. Lamont West was very good in this game. Asa Ahmad as well. Kanate. I mean, that front court's gonna dominate as long as Bolden's healthy. I think this team's gonna be really, really good.
Very surprised that Chase Harler played like 37 minutes. All I heard from West Virginia fans all off season was Brandon Napper and Jermaine Haley. And if you don't think those guys are going to be the starters and the main contributors, you don't know what you're talking about. I had people tell me that it's going to be Napper at the 1, Haley at the 2, Bolden off the bench. That's how good that Haley and Napper were. I had other people tell me how good Jordan McCabe was, and McCabe was horrible. Especially like down the stretch, he threw one horrible entry pass to the post that just sailed right out of bounds. So those guys are going to need more time, especially Napper. Coming off the injury, being a redshirt freshman, I think he'll be fine. But Bolden's clearly the guy in that backcourt. And then just I don't know if we're moving on to some other games, but that Ohio State Cincinnati Rock fight was also pretty interesting. Cincinnati did not look good offensively, especially Kane Broom, who needs to be their secondary scorer. He was like 1 for 10 from the field.
Yeah, I was not at all impressed by Cincy. I thought Ohio State's defense looked really good. I mean, watch out when Ohio State adds DJ Carton, Alonzo Gaffney, and EJ Liddell to the mix. Like, that's going to be so scary because they're good on D right now. They just don't have playmakers. They're gonna hang in a lot of games, just because they're so good on D, and then I think they'll win more games than they should because Chris Holtman's a really good coach. Once you give them those guys, whoo, that's going to be some scary, scary stuff for the rest of college basketball.
They have C.J. Walker coming in too, the former Florida State starting point guard.
Good call.
It's going to be interesting to see how he and Carton, like if they play together or whatnot. But they rolled out a very interesting lineup that was not very successful to start the game. It was Jackson, Muhammad, Andre Wesson, Kyle Young, and Caleb Wesson. But when that lineup was usually going to start the second half, it looked a lot better and really started to pull away. But the game kind of changed in Ohio State's favor when Dwayne Washington and Keyshawn Woods came in, gave a little more offense. Went with that 3-guard look and really paid off. And in terms of Cincinnati, they just they need these guys who were role players previously, especially guys like Trey Scott and like Keith Williams, to take a major step forward. And they certainly did not live up to that through that first game.
Yeah, completely agree on that. Let's kind of move on to some more bubble teams. That was a good kind of segue because Cincinnati was in a couple top 25s, but more of a bubble team in my book. Let's talk about some teams that had some pretty impactful week ones. I think UCF's a good place to start. A good win over a Rider team that will probably wind up being a quadrant 2 win for them at home. They could be a top 75. Yeah, it might wind up being a quadrant 3 with tough luck, but Rider's a good ball club that they handled. I wasn't surprised by that. I thought it was a really tough matchup for Rider because Rider showed relying on just getting to the basket and being more physical, and they weren't going to do that to UCF. But then they come out today and they lose to FAU, a team that is not supposed to be very good in the Conference USA. Year one of Dusty May. Give Dusty May a lot of credit for bringing in some late talent. Xavier Stapleton, the grad transfer, was really good in this game, 14 and 10. Holdover Anthony Adger at 19. But this team was, as I said, not supposed to be that great. Carlin Sillins is a freshman European import from Latvia, who was impressive in this game as a big man. Same with Jalen Seabury, a kind of athletic wing for FAU. That's going to be a bad loss for UCF. It's not a crusher, but it's not a good sign for the American. And they've got a couple more traps coming up in terms of tough mid-major games. UCF does. Cal State Fullerton, who pushed really hard against Arizona State earlier this week as part of one of the preseason tournaments. They also have Northern Kentucky, Alabama. They have a trip to Missouri, Georgia Southern, who's a really good mid-major. They also have an Illinois State matchup before conference play gets underway. So UCF's gonna have some plenty of opportunity, but they also have some opportunity to pick up a lot of losses in the non-conference slate.
Yeah, just such a disappointing game. I mean, they really had a chance, if they could minimize their errors in the non-conference to, really cement themselves as the favorite that they were deemed in the preseason. I mean, just that whole AAC. I mean, you have Wichita State losing to Louisiana Tech, which, that's not a terrible loss, but still probably going to be sub 100. They do beat Providence, but I mean, that was a horrible game from Providence. I'm not sure how much that's a sign of Wichita State being back or anything. I mean, Providence was atrocious defensively in that game, almost all the way around, and only have two like real scoring threats. It kind of reminds me of last year when UMass beat Providence. I saw a lot of UMass fans saying, this shows that the season's going well. Like we've turned the corner, and then they ended up at the bottom as well. I don't think Wichita State's headed for the bottom, especially in this AAC. But I think that they're probably still on the outside looking in terms of a tournament appearance. And then SMU loses to Southern Miss. another really head scratching loss, even without Jerry Foster.
Yeah, no, the AAC does not look well positioned as of now in terms of their bids. Another team that was very unimpressive this week, South Carolina. Now, they open up with a rock fight against South Carolina Upstate. Needed a 20 to nothing run in this game to pull away. They only won by 13. South Carolina Upstate was legit one of the worst teams in college basketball last year. One of the worst defenses in the country. Conceded well over 80 points a game. South Carolina puts up 65. I mean, that has to be a concern for an offense we weren't high on to begin with. That had some questions. And then they come out on I believe it was Friday night. Yes, it was. And they lose to Stony Brook. Probably going to finish top 3 in the America East based on their start, beating George Washington and South Carolina. But still losing a bye game to an America East team is not a good sign for South Carolina in the slightest. Trey Campbell has been their point guard. He's been not really passing the ball well. 2 assists in that game, 0 assists in their opener. Chris Silva was quiet in this game, had some foul trouble. AJ Lawson really has been the guy creating offense. He's been excellent, averaging 16 points, 4 assists, and 2 rebounds in their 2 games. But I think it's a really concerning loss for your South Carolina. That was a team I came in fairly high on. I'm worried about that pick already.
Yeah, it seems like Silva can't stay out of foul trouble. Kotsar is kind of taking a step back. They're relying on a freshman in AJ Lawson, who's not this elite type, like your top 10 sort of NBA prospect, one and done type recruit. He's being relied upon. And then your point guard play is really suspect. Trey Campbell's the guy who couldn't even get on the court for a Georgetown team that desperately needed a point guard, then had some major injuries in a major car accident. He's just a year or 2 removed from that. So this is a guy who hasn't played in a while, and when he was playing, he wasn't he wasn't a suitable point guard, and now he needs to be a SEC caliber starting point guard. It's not a great mix. It's disappointing because I thought South Carolina was probably an NIT team as well, and Providence is playing them on Saturday. I thought maybe that could be on a neutral court that could maybe be a quadrant 2 win. It looks like maybe they are also headed toward the bottom of their SEC conference.
What's the number for a quadrant 1 or a quadrant 2 on a neutral floor?
1 is 50.
Okay.
I think
I lost you for a second. What was that quadrant 2 number?
I believe quadrant 2 is 75, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, if 75, it'll be tight. If it's a little bigger, then that would be a little better shape. Another team I wanted to personally touch on, Maryland struggled in their 2 bye games. Technically, that Navy game wasn't a bye game. It was the second game of that game, that doubleheader that Providence and Wichita State were playing. Struggled badly with Delaware, only won by 6. Really could have easily lost that game. And then Navy, they were tied in the second half, then pulled away a little bit late. A bit more confirmation that maybe this team isn't very good, as you've kind of talked about all off season.
Yeah, I was not very high on Maryland coming in. The main points being they lose Kevin Huerter. People have them being better. They're playing with 2 bigs on a team that struggled with turnovers last year when they had a guy like Huerter, who's an NBA caliber player, and a star point guard like Cowan. Super reliant on Cowan and super reliant on freshmen who are, Wiggins is like borderline top 50, but Ayala is like top 100. So that's typically guys that you want to maybe wait and see, maybe not have to rely on them, but if they are capable, then you can use them. So it's not a very deep team, playing traditionally. I thought the shooting wasn't going to be great. So there's a lot of reasons not to like Maryland. It seems like the only reason you would be if they have 2 excellent players in Fernando and Cowan and this 5-star freshman in Jalen Smith.
Yeah, I'm completely agree. Chris Mack's opener for Louisville struggles a little bit in that game. That was tight with 2 minutes to go before Louisville pulled away. Any takes on that one, Brad? I didn't watch a ton of it, so it's hard for me to say much. But it's definitely not good that they couldn't put away a Nichols team that should be at best a mid-pack Southland Conference club.
No, I didn't watch this game. I mean, a lot of these bye games are unwatchable unless it's your favorite team playing. But I think, whether you're high on Louisville or are down on them like we are, they're going to look a lot better at the end of the season. And I know that's usually a cop out because I'm usually the one claiming that, saying that's a cop out because every team is going to be better by, with hundreds of practices by the end of the season, and all that time to play. But new coach with all these guys stepping into new roles and a very good coach. I think this is a scenario where waiting and seeing is perfectly legitimate. Kind of take on them.
Another kind of game discussing some bubble teams. I thought Arkansas looked pretty solid against Texas. I was not all that impressed by Texas. Texas, it appears, still has not figured out how to recruit a shooter. Kerwin Roach took 11 threes, was 4 for 11. I think that's about as good as you're going to get from him. They needed every one of them to outlast Arkansas in overtime at Fort Hood. I mean, why is it so hard for Shaka Smart to go out and recruit a shooter? Like, I just don't understand it. We see, is it something fundamentally wrong with their offense that Shaka Smart teams just shoot the ball so horribly? I mean, it was another kind of rock fight that Texas played in. I thought Arkansas looked pretty solid. Daniel Gafford is really bulked up. I still don't know that he's a guy you just want to feed the post and see what he can do. But I mean, he's going to be a really good player for them. Isaiah Joe was impressive, the freshman. Jalen Harris and Mason Jones, they're relying on Peverly in the backcourt. They were fine, nothing special. I still don't think the NCAA tournament team, but looked better than I expected against a Texas team that I had higher hopes for than I saw on Friday night.
Yeah, so Gafford looked really good. Joe really shot the ball well. He's someone who I was high on coming into the year. And then Adriel Bailey looked good too. He had a few jumpers. He was a nice fit playing next to Gafford. Arkansas looked good. As the offseason progressed, I kind of grew more and more fond of Arkansas. I think that they could actually be okay. Maybe even challenge for an NIT spot. Maybe move into that 9 through 11 range in the SEC. In terms of Texas, I think Febres is supposed to be a shooter. He hasn't really materialized. Even like their incoming guards, maybe Elijah Long or Courtney Ramey. Maybe as they get to play more, maybe there'll be a little more of shooters. And then Texas was absolutely on the ropes. Kerwin Roach tying 3 to send it to overtime. Then they kind of pulled away there. But Dylan Ozakowski, one of my favorite players, but he's just so frustrating to watch. Where he has like 6 turnovers, but he's someone who he always makes plays, but it's like one good play, one turnover. So that's a frustrating part. But I mean, he could be their second best player, maybe behind Roach, which says a lot about kind of the upper level talent on this team. But you're right, they need someone to shoot the ball, whether it's someone that they build coming in as a shooter or someone finding the range. That's a top priority for them.
Completely agree. Do you have any more kind of high major teams that you takes on from the opening week? A couple of other significant results. Long Beach State challenged UCLA. Oklahoma State blew a 20-point lead and lost to Charlotte on the road. I mean, that's a brutal loss for Oklahoma State. That's going to have some struggles this season against a bad Charlotte team. Georgetown struggled with Central Connecticut. Syracuse has had no problems in their 2 bye-game wins. Michigan had some trouble scoring the ball against Holy Cross yesterday. Purdue has had a nice performance against a Ball State team that's really good. Any other high major games you wanted to touch on before we touch on the A-10, maybe even the Conference USA, which have had pretty interesting weeks. The Mountain West as well has been an interesting week.
No, I think we can move into the A-10, which is dropping bye games by the day. They've actually may have lost more bye games than there have been days of the season to this point. Even a team like
George
Fordham,
Washington's lost 2. I mean,
yeah,
that's not a good start.
even it seemed like Fordham, who everyone has in last, they're ranked in like the whatever 280s or whatever they're ranked in Ken Pom. They go on the road to Houston Baptist and lose. So I mean, no matter where you are in the standings, if you're George Mason, who's lost 2 as well, if you're George Washington, LaSalle's lost 1. I mean, it's craziness.
Yeah, I mean, George Mason went from a A10 top 4 pick by everyone to literally no chance of an at-large bid. Like, I cannot envision a scenario in which a team that loses to Penn and American at home gets an at-large bid, save them like winning out. I mean, they have no shot, and they have not looked good. I mean, they have the thing that keeps getting said every time George Mason is struggling in a game is, oh, well, they just don't have the athleticism to blow teams away, so they're going to be in close games, which, like, I buy, but you should be able to handle American at home. Like you should have enough talent to handle American at home. It should, and if you don't, excuse me, Coach Paulson has to be an absolute wizard with X and O's. Otherwise, why are you picking them this high? I am very worried about George Mason.
I mean, there's nothing to even be worried about. I mean, it's done. I mean, they have two terrible losses, and their conference is absolutely collapsing to the point where, and almost any loss that they take, probably half the teams, probably half the teams in the A10 at least will be sub 100, right? So that's, one of every 2 games you're going to be at risk of taking another sub 100 loss. You could, I mean, it's going to be difficult for them not to have like 5 or 6. So I mean, they're all done. But the A10 is a weak enough league where they could win the auto bid.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just want to see some improvement because I'm just disappointed because I've kind of ridden the George Mason bandwagon for quite some time with Coach Paulson. Dayton has looked pretty solid in 2 opening by-game wins. They've been playing really bad teams, but I think Obi Toppin having averaging over 18 points a game in those 2 is a super impressive number. Ryan Mikesell's been solid, averaging 15, playing the 4. They've done this without Josh Cunningham, but their backcourt's solid. I think they're not super deep. Frankie Policelli is redshirting, which is a really weird thing to do given they only had, I believe, 9 scholarship players to begin with, and they're just going to redshirt a kid because he's not ready to play. I mean, they're deep up front, so I guess it makes some sense, but man, and I'm sure you could burn the redshirt at any time, but I didn't really get that one unless he's really not ready to play. A guy with high major offers, but I mean, I'm excited about Toppin. He's just looked so good. This Dayton team gets a surprise. Rhode Island played Bryant, so I don't know how much to take away, but they could be maybe sneaking in. They could be a beneficiary of this. UMass struggled in their opener against UMass Lowell, but then handled business against New Hampshire. Davidson struggled with Dartmouth. Duquesne had a nice win over William and Mary. I mean, which teams do you think could kind of take advantage of George Mason looking down, of some of these other groups looking down and run away? I mean, St. Louis, I think, is the bigger team that has also struggled. I mean, really had difficulty with both Southeast Missouri State and Troy so far. I mean, the resume stays alive, but they just haven't looked the part of his tournament team.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of teams without blemishes right now. Teams that could realistically make a push to the top. You mentioned UMass, URI, Duquesne, Dayton, St. Joe's, St. Louis. But when the rest of the league is dropping these games, you're making these minefields in your league, which is eliminating your margin for error. Where you need the rest of the league to kind of hold its weight, to kind of keep its net rating or its RPI to a point where, right? Because you have to beat these teams whether they're good or they're bad. So they might as well be good to kind of bolster your resume. And we're setting up a point with the A10 where these teams are just not going to be good enough to provide any substance. It's going to be like a normal mid-major league, and it's looking more and more like a one-bid league. I think I'm going to stick with St. Louis for now, but I mean, there are still 5 or 6 different really good options at that top spot. But with all these bye game losses, it just kind of dilutes the league as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I it's just gonna be really tough. I mean, I said before the season, I just don't see a team that looks at large caliber. I mean, let alone to build the resume, which I think you have excellent points on. I haven't seen a team so far that I jump out and say that's a top 40, top 50, maybe even top 60 team in college basketball. I mean, maybe UMass gets better as the season goes on. Maybe Davidson finds their stride beyond being a 3-man team. Maybe Dayton's guys come together. Maybe VCU once Marcus Evans is healthy looks outstanding. I don't know, but I mean, at some point, you need a top 60 team to get an at-large bid. I don't see one in this mix. I think that's a pretty concerning sign for the A10.
And I thought both the A10 and the AAC were, with the AAC it's top 8, with the A10 just kind of like the whole league. I thought it was going to be better to a point where it was going to be an interesting race between all these kind of bubble-ish teams. Really a compelling matchups of all these comparable teams. There may not be a top team, but I thought all that kind of parity was going to be very interesting. But we've gotten to a point where this parity is just going to look like a normal mid-major league where it's really not that interesting because there's very limited stakes.
Yeah, I think the same could be said about the Mountain West. I was excited about the middle of this league maybe being up a little bit. There's been obviously the talk about Nevada at the top, San Diego State as well. And New Mexico, the luster's been lost a little bit without Shaquan Lyle. This league's had a couple rough days as well. UNLV scored 50 points against Loyola Marymount. That's a really bad performance. Boise State blows a big lead to an Idaho State team that's probably a mediocre Big Sky team. Wyoming got hammered by Oregon State and handled at home by UC Santa Barbara team that just got hammered by North Dakota State. San Jose State and Air Force really bad. Like that's concerning as well. Just kind of creating these minefields. Not so much for Nevada because I think they'll be fine. But for San Diego State, it's going to try to build a resume for maybe even a New Mexico, who's going to try to build a resume now. New Mexico did not look good against Cal State Northridge. Really struggled in that game. Only won on a buzzer beater by Anthony Mathis. Lamine Diane, redshirt freshman for Cal State Northridge, had 34 and 7. So that's pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, this team didn't. Vance Jackson only played 23 minutes in this game, 7 points, 8 rebounds. A little bit unimpressive. They didn't start a point guard. They started Mathis, Corey Manigault, Vance Jackson, Makuach Maluach, and Vladimir Pinchik. So a lot of these just interchangeable athletes. But Mathis was running the show. That's not really his game. Keith McGee was a guy I was hoping would step in there. That's a bit of a concern. Are you concerned that the A10, that the Mountain West could be like the A10, developing more of these minefields throughout their schedule?
Well, absolutely. I mean, in my final top 100 for the preseason that I made, only 2 teams from the Mountain West, being Nevada and San Diego State. I didn't think Fresno or New Mexico or UNLV or any of them, were really worth consideration over the teams in the back part of that ranking. That just makes the margin for error too slim. Where on paper you can say, all right, San Diego State should go 17-1, right? Or teams in these mid-major leagues, you could say, from your ivory tower that, Middle Tennessee State should go 20-0, but it's much easier said than done. And losses will happen, and you need the bottom and the middle of your league to be good enough where the losses don't kill you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the Conference USA is an example of this potentially manifesting itself in terms of the bottom and the middle being better than we expected. That's been the knock on the league the last several years, is that the bottom and the middle have been so bad that it hasn't mattered that Middle Tennessee is really good. It doesn't matter that Western Kentucky was really good last year, couldn't get a bid. I mean, we knew Marshall was going to be really good. We knew that Western Kentucky, we had a ton of talent. We knew that even teams like North Texas would look really good. But to have Charlotte win a bye game over Oklahoma State, obviously Oklahoma State is not that good this season, but that's still kind of a significant outcome. Your Louisiana Tech beats Wichita State. Southern Miss, who is a team that I think a lot of people saw as a sleeper, gets that big win over SMU that we mentioned before. I think the depth of this FAU got that UCF win today. I mean, that the depth of that league is developing really nicely. And I think you have to look at the coaching hires they've made over the last several years. Grant McCaslin at North Texas, really strong hire. Middle Tennessee State just made a coaching change, but they had Kermit Davis for a really long time, who's really good. Doc Sadler's building that program at Southern Miss. I mean, D'Antoni Ball is working well at Marshall. Dusty May, great hire this offseason for FAU. And then obviously Stansberry with his recruiting. Ron Sanchez at Charlotte is recruiting really well. Jeff Jones does a really solid job at Old Dominion. I mean, just look up and down the conference. There's just a lot of really good coaches, and that really matters at the mid-major level. I think the depth of this league is really showing off as a result. I don't know if this is a multi-bid league this year, but to me, this league looks as good, if not better, than the A10.
I think it was like Colonial, maybe or maybe 2 years ago, where in terms of like the Ken Palm or higher than like one of the usual suspects in the top 10 conferences, whether it be the WCC or the Mountain West. I don't remember, but you just get your middle and your bottom to a point where it can elevate and kind of make those top teams look even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it completely is going to remove those top 100 or sub 100 loss minefields, but it's definitely a league on the rise, and it's going to be something I'm going to really enjoy watching throughout the season. Is how this league continues to develop and continues to grow. Any other takes just on the general week of games? We do want to pick some games for this week. We want to pick some tournaments as well. We have our first in-season tournaments, which means our first day basketball coming up, which I cannot wait for. I know that.
Yeah, why don't we move on to the tournament picking?
All right, let's do it.
So first tournament we have the Charleston Classic, which starts on Thursday. The 8 teams involved are Ball State, Virginia Tech, Alabama, Northeastern, Wichita State, Davidson, Purdue, and Appalachian State. So out of that group, who do you think comes home with that Charleston Classic title?
I mean, that's really tough. It's a really good field. I'm really impressed by a lot of these teams. God, that's a really tough pick. I think I'm gonna go with Virginia Tech. With their veteran guards. I mean, I'm worried about losing Chris Clark, but I think I'll go with Virginia Tech here.
I'm going to go with a little upset pick here. I'm going to go with Purdue. I think they have a explosive scoring guard in Carson Edwards, who's probably the best player in the tournament. Just quickly looking, I mean, maybe you could make an argument for like a Kellen Grady, or I mean, it's probably the only argument that you could make there. But Carson Edwards is going to be one of the top players in the country, big time scoring guard, and I like what Purdue can do going big or small between guys like Boudreaux and Matt Harms especially. So I'll go with the Boilermakers.
All right, and the other field that we have, some of the other fields we have this week, the Myrtle Beach Invitational, St. Joe's, Wake Forest, UCF, Cal State Fullerton, Valpo, Western Kentucky, and West Virginia. Personally, I'll be picking West Virginia in this turn. Not West Virginia, excuse me, Western Kentucky in this tournament. They'll get the Sean Murray back, which will be big. Hollingsworth will be there. Josh Anderson. So they'll have that pretty much the full roster we expected to see. I think with a lot of these high majors having struggled so far, West Virginia is definitely the X factor here, but I think Western Kentucky is a pretty solid pick here.
I'm going to go with Central Florida redeeming itself and picking up the win here. I mean, that bye game, they're going to be kicking themselves about that in March, but this is still a super talented team with that big three. Great defense led by Taco Fall in the middle. In terms of West Virginia, when you have a guy like James Bolden who's injured, he's super important. But with these 3 games in 3 days or 3 games in 4 days, the odds of him being able to play at 100% in all 3 of them quite low. So I'm going to go with team on the other side of the bracket and take the Knights.
Yeah, that's an excellent call. A few other events that we've got going on this week. 2K Classic at, I believe, MSG, Cuse, UConn, Oregon, and Iowa. What are your thoughts here, Brad?
I'm going to go with Syracuse here. Um, very, very high on their defense, and I'm very interested that they've moved Elijah Hughes in the starting lineup ahead of Dolezaj, who was the starter last year. I like Dolezaj as a glue guy, but it seems like Hughes is bringing a lot more of an offensive punch. Maybe he could kind of solve their offensive woes from last season. And I think Frank Howard should be back. This is only a 2-game tournament, so the odds of him, being able to play in at least one, whereas a guy like Bolden, maybe he can only play one of the 3. Howard maybe could go in one of the 2, if not both.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think I'm going to go with Oregon. Haven't really seen anything to dislike so far in a pair of bye games with this group. I think Syracuse's defense will be tested in a Syracuse Oregon matchup, just by their ability to space the floor with Bol at the 5. He looked really good in those highlights. It's going to be tough. People are going to have a really interesting perception of Bol if they only watch highlights of him, because they'll be like, oh my God, 7-2 guy drilling threes and swatting shots into oblivion in bye games. Like, I think we're going to have to watch full games of him. I haven't seen a full game of him, so it's going to be hard for me to say his true impact on games, but I think he potentially poses a tough mismatch against Syracuse.
Yeah, I haven't seen a full game of him either. I did watch the Draft Express video, and his kind of motor and kind of lack of interest are like the main concerns. But Thursday night, Oregon, Iowa, that should definitely be a good game to watch. Iowa will be able to challenge him with some pretty talented bigs of their own. Very interesting note about Iowa that Jack Nunge is redshirting. He started, I think, most of last season at that 3 spot, but he's more of like a 4. He kind of fits the Jared Uthoff mold, although Uthoff was obviously a better player than Nunge through 1 year. But he's super skinny. Maybe he comes back with a little more strength next year. That's a good move for him personally. Kind of a strange move for Iowa, the team.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Sean Bach on press row at Iowa yesterday for Northwestern Iowa football. We talked some hoops. Sean Bach, a good guy. We tried to have him on the podcast earlier. He was unable to do it, but we will definitely have him on at some point. Sean was surprised that Nunge was redshirting as well. But yeah, I think the thought was because he's not going to start, because they have Tyler Cook and Luka Garza up front. And it's tough to play him at the 3. Better to save the year. They still have some front court depth. I think that was the thought process with losing Nunge. But it is interesting, especially in a year where I think some people think Fran McCaffrey could be on the hot seat. I think he probably has one more year. I've been concerned so far with Iowa. Just the defense has still been a bit ugly, which because their roster is just built wrong for what Fran McCaffrey wants to do. They haven't lost a bye game, but definitely a team that hasn't looked great in those two bye game wins over Green Bay and UMKC.
All right, Mohegan Sun, Providence, South Carolina, Michigan, GW. Who do you have in this one?
Got to be Michigan, the way those 4 teams have played so far. Would it stun me if Providence came out and AJ Reeves just hit like 10 threes and they beat Michigan if they can get to that point? I wouldn't stun me, but I would. I think Michigan is the clear favorite here.
I go with Providence because I wouldn't be able to watch that game. I might as well align my pick with my rooting interest. My reasoning as to why they could beat Michigan is I don't think that Michigan has like the dynamic kind of undersized guard to take advantage of them. That's an area that Providence has struggled with defending, like your Marcus Howards, or in the last game like a Samaje Haynes-Jones. Michigan does it a lot from the wing with Matthews and Poole and Brazdeikis. I think that Providence can match up pretty well with their collection of wings there. So that's why I would pick Providence over Michigan.
Yeah, that's fair. Paradise Jam, pretty mediocre field, given that Mizzou's going to be down, Oregon State's down. I think Kansas State has to be seen as the clear favorite. There's some pretty good mid-majors in here with Old Dominion and Northern Iowa. We lost to UT Arlington. That's a pretty ugly loss to a bad Sun Belt team. Penn's in there, but they just lost Ryan Betley against George Mason for the year with a patellar tendon rupture, I believe it was. With this light field, I think Kansas State rolls.
Yeah, me too. I think a Kansas State Old Dominion final. I think Old Dominion's on the cusp of the top 100. But Kansas State's a top 20 team.
Yeah. And then the Gavitt games get underway this week. I was considering going to a Gavitt game tip matchup in Chicago on Thursday night. That'll be Penn State and DePaul. I decided that game wasn't interesting enough to justify me going to a game that's going to start at 8, which means I'm not going to get back to my dorm until midnight. By the time I go to the press conference, write my story, get back on Chicago public transit, have to take multiple trains, walk like a mile. Decided it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough intrigue there to drag me down to Wintrust. If it was a 7:00 tip off, I probably would have made the trip. But I'll be at Loyola on Wednesday. I'll be at Northwestern on Monday and Friday. So figured there'll be plenty of basketball for me. I could sit this one out. But overall, the Gavitt games, a couple of matchups here: Wisconsin at Xavier on Tuesday, Georgetown at Illinois as well. That on that Tuesday, Michigan Villanova the headliner, Seton Hall at Nebraska, Marquette at Indiana, Ohio State at Creighton, Penn State at DePaul, and then St. John's at Rutgers to kind of round out those games in the Gavitt games. Brad, who do you like in the Gavitt games? Big East, Big Ten, or tie?
I'm going to go with Big East just because I think the home teams will kind of hold serve, except I think St. John's will beat Rutgers. That would give the Big East a 5-3 advantage there.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Nebraska beats Seton Hall. I think Villanova beats Michigan. I think Indiana probably beats Marquette. I think Wisconsin probably picks off Xavier. Xavier's kind of struggled early. So that would bring things to it would be 3-1, just kind of going through all these games. Now, Georgetown, Illinois is a toss-up. Give it to Illinois with their guards. So it's 4-1 Big Ten. And then Creighton, I think, could lose at home to Ohio State. I'll pick Ohio State in that game. So 5-1 Big Ten. DePaul holds serve, so 5-2. And then let's say St. John's beats Rutgers at Rutgers. I think it'll be close, but so that's 5-3 for the Big Ten.
Yep. So we have exact opposite picks there. And just moving into some weekly picks, I picked out from Monday through Friday, I believe 16 or 17 games that are, like the most relevant games that aren't in a tournament or like close games. We don't have to hit all 17. Maybe we'll pick out 10 to do, or 9, so we can have like a even record there.
9 in a bye game. Yep, 9 in a bye game.
Cool. So the first one I want to do is Buffalo at Southern Illinois. If a Buffalo wants to be a at-large team, this is a game that they have to have because it could be a quadrant 2, and those opportunities would be very, very hard to come by in a mid-major league. And I think Buffalo gets it done, knocks off a pretty good Southern Illinois team.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I think it's going to be really tough on the road, coming off kind of that big win hangover you always worry about. But this team's so veteran, so experienced. I think Buffalo finds a way.
Your turn to pick a game.
All right. It's going off the list here. Let's do that Wisconsin-Xavier game. I think it'll be really fascinating.
I'll take Xavier. They're at home. Quentin Gooden, in the most recent game, that was his first game back from a separated shoulder. I think now getting probably their best player. Back assimilated into the lineup. I think that they'll start to look a lot better. They've got a great contributions from Tyreek Jones, which is kind of unexpected. That he's been a little more than a glue guy so far. They have a great fit in the front court with Welledge, and then a couple of breakout sophomores in Scruggs and Marshall. Give me Xavier over Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'll take Wisconsin here. Just think Xavier struggled a little bit with their 2-bye games so far. Gets a veteran team coming to town. First real test for Travis Steele. I think this one goes to the wire, but Wisconsin finds a way late.
And if Wisconsin wins, I'm going to put them in my top 25 most likely. And if Xavier wins, they'll probably be right on the cusp there. There aren't really too many teams to put in the top 25. I was looking at mine earlier. After 23 or 24, so it kind of falls off a cliff.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, so the next one I'll pick will be Georgia and Temple. Games at Temple. Who do you have in this one, Kevin?
I think Temple wins that one. Georgia on the road. I don't think they have the firepower. Temple finds a way.
Yeah, I'm pretty high on Temple. I have them in like the 60-ish range. I have Georgia in like the 90s. Temple being at home too. I think that their guards certainly have the edge. Maybe a big game here for Devondre Perry, who looks like he's emerged as the starting power forward there for Temple.
That's an excellent call. Next game I'll pick. Let's do that Harvard UMass game because I think it's super important. Harvard still likely without Aiken and Seth Towns. Is that the last we've been hearing? If so, I think UMass is the pick here.
Agree. Without their two best players, these Ivy teams have like 17, 18 guys on them, and Harvard has the most talent. Their 17, 18 guys are all like 2 or 3 stars, some even 4-star recruits. But I think without their top two, I think UMass has the edge here.
Yeah.
Next one I'll pick is Georgetown at Illinois.
Really tough game. That's really tough. I think Illinois finds a way with their guards. Ayo Dosunmu was really good against, albeit a very bad Evansville team. I think this team comes to play at home. Crowd will be popping at State Farm Center. They find a way against Georgetown.
Yeah, Georgetown. Very interesting thing is they're starting both Akinjo and McClung over Javon Blair. I found that very interesting. Both Akinjo and McClung have had some learning curves, we'll say. They've both been pretty inefficient, a lot of turnovers. I'm going to go with Illinois in this matchup, too. I'm a big Ayo Dosunmu fan. Love Trent Frazier as well. And then Kipper Nichols is a really nice kind of role player four-man in the front court.
Yeah, I completely agree. Michigan Villanova, I feel like we have to pick. It's just such an important game. Probably the best game we have all week. I think Villanova at home. Their defense was a little suspect in their bye game against Morgan State. I think it's a bit of a concern for a younger team, but they're just more talented than Michigan. Michigan's still kind of finding their way with Brett Zekias. I think I'll take Villanova here.
Me too. Another interesting lineup note about Villanova is I think in their exhibition and in their first game, they went with Dylan Painter and Jermaine Samuels in the starting lineup over Cremo and DCR, but they've since flipped that in their most recent game. Quinterly's still coming off the bench. He had kind of a rough start in his first 2 games, but I think Gillespie is certainly a capable point guard. Very, very deep team. They're like 10 deep at least. Ton of versatile wings. Give me Villanova here.
That's fair. You got the next pick.
Yep. How about Marquette at Indiana?
That's tough. I think Indiana at home. Marquette's still trying to find its way on offense. I was very surprised Chartouni didn't start for this team. I was still kind of a fan of that two ball handler backcourt that they're going to play. That's an interesting look that they decided not to go with. I think Indiana rolls here.
I'm going to go with Marquette. I think I can see why you would want to start a guy like Brendan Bailey after he played so well in their like practices and like preseason preparation. But the more interesting thing for me was Ed Morrow is seemingly in the doghouse, and he didn't start the most recent game. They started Theo John, who was horrible last year, but it seems like Morrow, even with his experience, maybe he's not going to be the impact player that I thought and many people thought. But if Theo John can kind of emerge as like a starting center, that gives them even more depth. And with their dynamic backcourt and guys like Marcus Howard and Sam Hauser, who are top level players, I think I'll give Marquette the edge here on the road.
All right. Let me just pull back up the spreadsheet as I lost it for some reason. To pick, how many more games do we have to do?
2 and then the bye game.
Okie dokie. I'll I'll pick the St. John's Rutgers game as my final game, and then you can choose one more. St. John's Rutgers. I just want to talk about this game because I think it'll be fun. I think Rutgers has looked good. The point guard with Geo Baker transition has been really smooth. Eugene Omarui has looked really solid at 24 points, made 4 threes today. Peter Kiss and Montez Mathis and even Ron Harper is kind of supporting scorers. They're playing with better tempo. I tweeted, if they're a league average offense, this team wins 20 games, might make the NCAA tournament. If this team is just not atrocious on offense, they'll improve. They're going to be really good on D. I think they push St. John's in this game. I think at Rutgers at home, I'm really tempted to pick Rutgers, actually. I think I'll do it. Let's throw it out there. Rutgers wins.
I'm staying on the St. John's bandwagon. I can't get off now, but very interesting that Seti Kita has made a very, very minimal impact so far. He's a guy. I don't know if I told this on the podcast yet, but so 2016 recruiting class, he was Providence's top target in the fall, and the word being from the kind of the people who relay the inside information that he was so talented and that they liked him so much. He would have started as a freshman, and to kind of go back in that time, that was right before Chris Dunn's final year at Providence. So everyone knew that Dunn was going to be leaving, but people did not know that Ben Bentil was going to be this 20-point per game scorer. So people were saying that both Bentil and Kita would start with Bullock and Lindsay and Cartwright, and that would be the team's starting lineup for the upcoming year if they got Kita, and they just missed out on him. So he's someone who I've always followed closely because the Providence staff was so high on him and so confident that he was going to kind of upgrade their talent level. But it seems like he can't really find his groove at either South Carolina or St. John's.
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating. St. John's really struggled with Bowling Green. I think on the road, St. John's struggles in this game, and Rutgers finds a way.
All right, last game, I'll go URI at College of Charleston.
Ooh, that's interesting. I think Rhode Island goes on the road and wins this game. College of Charleston still kind of finding their way. They have a new point guard, Zepp Jasper, who's looked pretty good. Redshirt freshman. He's like a 21-year-old redshirt freshman. They struggled with Western Carolina after kind of battling with Presbyterian to open the year. Two not very good teams. So I think while they figure out playing without Joe Shealy, they struggle a little bit and drop one to a good URI team.
Yeah, I'm also going with URI. I think that they're better than people really think. They have this big three, more or less, with Doughton, Russell, and Langevin, guys who've all played a lot. And I think that Doughton especially is being underrated because of the kind of the backseat he took to their seniors last year. Guys like Stanford Robinson, E.C. Matthews, and Jerry Terrell. So I think that URI has more talent than people think, and they kind of redeem the A-10 here and get what should be a quadrant 2, maybe even a quadrant 1 win if they're lucky.
Yeah, I don't see it being quadrant 1, but you never know. I just don't think College Charleston's top 75 team this year. I think more in the top 100 range. But yeah, those with the net, we don't really know what we're evaluating. So it'll be very interesting to see whether that game becomes a sneaky quadrant 1 for Rhode Island. Let's pick a bye game that gets lost. Let's pick some epitome of brutality, Brad. I see Maryland suffering some brutality on Friday night against Hofstra. Hofstra, a team with some excellent scoring guards. I think Hofstra finds a way. Maryland struggled in their 2 bye games so far. That's my bye game of the week.
So I had that game on my list. I'm also tempted about Cal and Hampton, but I'm going to go with Radford and Notre Dame. I think Radford's going to pick off Notre Dame. Kind of a hot take because a lot of people are still pretty high on Notre Dame. This is a team that's relying a lot on freshmen. They haven't looked great. I think they've played a couple closer than anticipated games. I think an experienced Radford team, who I believe brought everyone back from last year, should be the Big South favorite. I think that they sneak one past Notre Dame here.
Yeah, that's a reasonable take. I had that on my list as well. Anything else before we wrap up the show?
Oh, I think that's it.
All right, it's going to be another fun week of basketball. We get day basketball starting on, I believe, Thursday, some 10:30 Eastern tip-offs. I am in pig heaven. Ball State, Virginia Tech at 10:30. You best believe I'm watching it. I might be betting on it. She's going to have some fun watching college hoops. Stick with us on the pod. We will bring you lots of good content over the next coming weeks. We're both busy people, but we'll try to bring you as many episodes, as much different stuff to talk about as we can. Keep following us on Twitter. Keep following our work at our various outlets that we love to express our thoughts. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great night.